1 minute past the hour of 2. I'd like to thank you all for keeping time and joining this webinar session right on time. This afternoon, we are discussing a very interesting subject, a subject that we began discussing at the beginning of this year, which is carbon markets. And we're still exploring this field. And this afternoon, we have a panel, a very experienced and competent panel of 4, which is moderated by Mr. Idi Kasi. I'll introduce Mr. Idi Kasi a little later. But for now, receive warm greetings from the East Africa Law Society. Very warm weather here in Arusha, Tanzania. This afternoon, as we start the webinar, I would like to inform you, our esteemed participants, that we have our FIDIC Construction Law Conference and FIDIC Contracts Conditions Training Workshop that is happening in Kigali, Rwanda from the 25th of September all through to the 27th of September. So if you have not yet booked your slot, please make it a point to book your slot. To get more details about this training, please visit our website and check our platforms and socials for more information. Also, in the same vein, on the 3rd and 4th of October, the East Africa Law Society, in conjunction with the McGill University Air and Space Institute, will be hosting the first ever International Space Law Masterclass right here in Nairobi, Kenya, on the 3rd and 4th of October at Emara Ore Sereni. If you would like to secure yourself a slot, please visit our socials and or write to us at info@elawsociety.org to secure your slot. Now, back to the subject of this afternoon. Our panel will be moderated by Mr. Idi Juma Kasi. Idi Juma Kasi is a Tanzanian qualified lawyer. He currently serves as an associate at Rex Attorneys in Dar es Salaam. Rex Attorneys is one of the leading in Tanzania, and Mr. Kasi has an extensive background in environmental managing, focusing on green energy and carbon trading. He brings a wealth of expertise to this role of moderator this afternoon. He holds an LLB from the University of Dar es Salaam. He's an advocate, notary public, and commissioner for oaths at the High Court of Dar es Salaam. He's an active member of the Young Lawyers Association of East Africa Law Society and the Tanganyika Law Society. This afternoon, we are profoundly honored to host you, Mr. Kasi. I'll hand it over to you now to start the deliberations. And we have exactly 2 hours to have this meeting. So at exactly 4, we'll be putting this meeting to a close. Over to you, Mr. Kasi.
Thank you so much, Gabriel, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As introduced, my name is Idi Kasi from Rex Attorneys, and I'll be moderating the webinar today titled Navigating the Future, Empowering Young Legal Professionals in East Africa on Carbon Markets. It's a pleasure to see many of you who are joining, and some of others who are also continue to join. This shows the keen interest in this important and timely topic. We had this session at the beginning of the year, and it's just a continuation. So I hope we're going to have a productive session today on top of the one we had last time. Today we aim to delve more on carbon markets and their complexities on international agreements like Paris Agreement, and explore the significant role that legal professionals play in this landscape, and specifically young lawyers within East Africa and the opportunities ahead of us. The importance of this webinar today, the webinar particularly specialized on special because it will focus on empowering the young legal professionals in East Africa As you all know, our region is not only rich in natural resources and biodiversity, but also faces unique challenges and opportunities when it comes to the climate change and the climate action. So to understanding how carbon markets works and how they can be leveraged to support both environmental and economic goals is essential in our region, and specifically our role as young lawyers to be champion and ahead of it. Why you can ask yourself why this role matters, the role to understanding and to leverage this to support both environmental and economic goals. The role matters because as young lawyers, we are at the forefront of navigating the evolving field of environmental law and carbon markets. Our role is crucial in shaping the legal frameworks that govern these markets. And as you can all be witness, the market is still evolving. We recently have in Tanzania, we recently have the regulation in 2022 and amendment 2023. So we can all see the market is still evolving. The law is so new. So our role is crucial in shaping these legal frameworks that govern these markets and ensuring that we have compliance and we have transparency in how we go about it. And the role, as will be delved more by the panelists today, will be varied from different angles. We varied in drafting agreements between the parties involved in carbon markets. Our role also will be on advocating for fair policies or ensuring environmental integrity and helping business to comply with this regulation. The expectation today, I can see we have a lineup of discussions and presentation and well-experienced panelists who will cover the basic on how carbon markets works, including key mechanism like cap trade and offset systems. Also, the panelists will introduce to international agreement, for instance, Paris Agreement, and how it facilitates the international cooperation in carbon markets. Also, the expectation from the panel is they will delve more on specific roles of legal professions play in this space, from, like I said, from drafting contracts to ensuring compliance and integrity. And we will have a best practice from from various African countries, and that will play like a real world examples and case studies to provide us with more practical insights and knowledge. Today we are also fortunate to have with us the panel of experts, like I said, and these experts will bring a wealth of knowledge and experience in this market, and specifically under the umbrella of environmental law and sustainable development. That is what you expect from the panel. What I expect as a moderator from all of you is to have an engaged session throughout the session. Feel free to use the chat and Q&A features to ask questions, share your thoughts, and connect with others. We want this to be, I anticipate, me and the panel, we discussed before that we anticipate to have an interactive and enriching experience for everyone, so that after this session, we will have something to like a key takeaway and way forward. So without further ado, I would like to lay a foundation before I introduce our first speaker. I would like to lay a foundation on an overview of carbon markets, but also what is carbon markets generally. I remember the last webinar. I'm not sure if the speakers we touch base this angle, but for the introduction purpose, I would like to use the simple terminologies, starting with the definition itself. So when we think of carbon markets, think of carbon markets like I can say like a marketplace where you can buy and sell the right to pollute. The question can come later, the right to pollute. Why the right to pollute? So just like you might have a lot of questions to that regard, but you might also think of the trading system like how we trade goods like fruits, like vegetable at the market. Now here at the carbon market, here companies and countries trade carbon credits or the permit itself. These credits now give them permission to emit a certain amount of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Why do we have carbon markets? The question I think we might also ask ourselves: why do we have this kind of market? The main goal of carbon market is to help fight climate change. That is the first goal of the carbon markets, and why we're saying to fight climate change. Now, from here, how are we going to fight the climate change? Is because the businesses. When I say about businesses, I mean industries or the like, which produces goods and services. At the end of the day, they often release carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Now, this carbon dioxide contribute to the global warming, and the global warming, the effect is to the worldwide. It's not only one country. I mean, we can all feel the effects of global warming. So by putting a price on these emissions, now carbon markets make companies think twice about how much they pollute, and putting the price tag on using up a shared resource. And on this regard, we can say it's our planet's ability now to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And the aim also being, apart from climate change, that being the main purpose of the carbon market, but also to incentivizing this reduction, but also to help generate more funds from buying and selling of these credits. We have two types of carbon markets. I think the next speaker will speak on key players and regulatory framework from Tanzania. But the type of market that we have globally, we have two types. We have the compliance markets and we have voluntary markets. The compliance part, this is type of market now where the government regulate the markets and the companies, and they put in place the legal requirement, either regulation or the laws or anything of the like, police, anything of the like, to limit the emission of the carbon to the atmosphere. And the operation of this compliance market, usually they operate under the international treaties where countries commit to reduce their carbon footprint. How are they going to commit themselves? This is by way of signing or pledge to the international treaties. And so far, I think we'll be speaking today about the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. I don't want to go deep on this because I expect I think the next speaker will delve more on the regulatory framework. But just to touch base a bit, the Kyoto Protocol, this was the first international agreement to set. Of course, its phase is currently phased out, but for just understanding, it's one of the first international agreement to set binding emission reduction targets for developed countries. And under this protocol, countries agreed to limit or reduce their emissions or or trade emission of this in allowance with other countries. And Paris Agreement, the recent one, this now it's a landmark international agreement where nearly every country pledged to limit their global warming, warming below 2 degrees centigrade, and the aim is for 1.5 degrees centigrade. So under Paris Agreement, each country sets its own targets, known as national NDC, National Determined Contribution, and they can use now the carbon market as a tool to meet these goals. So a simple example on how national determined contribution works is that each country pledge to under the agreement, Paris Agreement, that by reaching maybe 2030, I'll give an example. Maybe for instance in Tanzania, the national determined contribution is where Tanzania has committed to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 30 to 35% by 2030. Now, this is Tanzania. We can go to other countries, for instance, Kenya or Uganda. Each country aims to reduce certain amount of carbon emission by a certain year. So, like I said, we will have a panel to delve more on how the NDC maybe works on their region. But for Tanzania, the NDC is 30 to 35% by 2030, and this if we can read the NDC as itself. Let me try to find a way to share it here. When you read the NDC, National Determined Contribution, you'll see that this one let me share with you just for awareness. Yeah, so as you can see, this is one of the examples of national determined contribution by Tanzania, and you can see on the forward where the Minister of State, Vice President Office in Union and Environment, commits that the United Republic of Tanzania commit to reduce greenhouse gas emission economy wide between 30 to 35 relative to the business as usual scenario by 2030. Now, speaking of other countries, I think we will have that later. The national determined contribution now, it's where each country, for instance, I'll give a simple, a further example to that. Tanzania might pledge to reduce by like I said, like we mentioned, we have seen 30 to 35. Then you can see other countries, for instance, maybe let's say Russia. Russia maybe pledged to reduce by maybe 30, the same by 2030. But since Russia now has a lot of industries which emits a lot of carbon to the atmosphere, they cannot stop conducting the business as usual. They will not stop. The business has to continue as usual. So now, how to mitigate that emission? How to mitigate now for them to continue producing goods and services while making sure that the carbon emitted to the atmosphere is being compensated by certain credits. Now that's when they come to other countries with which they haven't met their target, and they can buy that amount of pledge which they haven't met yet. So if Tanzania has pledged to reduce by 20, and maybe by today, this threshold for them is just maybe 5 or 2, but for other countries which exceed, nearly exceeding that, threshold, they can come and just buy that part, and that's how simply how the market works. And that was the first part of the compliance market, where we have seen the protocol, Paris Agreement, and Kyoto Protocol, and the example from Tanzania. But now the voluntary part, that is the second part. The first one was compliance, like I say, type of market. The second part is voluntary, the voluntary market. The voluntary market here, this is the market that operates outside regulatory frameworks, allowing companies or governments and individuals to voluntarily purchase carbon offsets, typically to demonstrate corporate social responsibility and meet their sustainable goals. And the examples we can see, it's individual offsetting, where individual can purchase offset for personal activities like energy use, but also for corporate offset programs, where many companies such as maybe tech firms or airlines purchase this offset to achieve their carbon neutrality and offset specific activities. Just to sum up on the foundation part, I will wish to keep the key difference now between the compliance and the voluntary market. The key difference, I think, compliance, like we have seen, is more regulated and mandatory for certain sectors or regions, whereas voluntary markets are optional and driven by individual or corporate initiatives. And also scope and the compliance market typically involve larger and more systematic emission reduction due to legal requirements, where voluntary markets can vary in size, scope, and depending on the willingness of the participants. So in a simple terms, now we can say the carbon markets are like a global game where the goal is to reduce pollution, but the government now set rules for how much pollution is allowed, and specifically how we mention on compliance markets under international treaties like Paris and we mentioned earlier. But also companies and countries then buy and sell this right to emit carbon dioxide at the atmosphere. The fewer emission you produce, the more you can save or make money. I will give you an example on why I say the fewer emission you produce, the more you can save and make money. I'll give you an example here. Let me share with you this slide. Okay. Just a simple illustration here. A simple illustration, specifically on the, specifically on this part, this slide. Specifically on this slide. This is, we can see on this where there is a purchase, there is a sale. And as you can see, they're both emitter A and emitter B. We have an emitter A here, and we have emitter B here. Now, emitter B, as you can see, both of them, we can give an example for countries. Emitter A, let's say it's emitter B, let's say it's Tanzania. Emitter B, let's say it's maybe we can say like any country, like let's say South Africa, or let's say South Africa. So this is emitter A. Now they both have this threshold, this red line here. This red line means the commitment each country pledges under the international agreement that they're not supposed to emit the carbon, certain carbon to the atmosphere beyond this line. So you can see, since Tanzania, we have maybe not that much. I mean, we don't have many industries to emit a lot of carbon to the atmosphere, comparing maybe to the South African. I'm not concluding that they have many companies, but just an example that we can see they emit. There is an excess greenhouse gases emission beyond the line that they pledge. Now, this line, since they emit beyond and they cannot stop, because once they stop producing goods and services by stopping the industry, the economy may collapse. So how to continue the economy, but also reducing carbon to the atmosphere. Now is when we come to the compensation part, where the one who reduces less, he can sell this right to this emitter A, so that he can emit or he can pollute on behalf. We can say on behalf because he's just buying this threshold here so that he can continue to produce goods. I mean, goods and services by industries. And yeah, so like I said, that is the simple terms when we said about carbon markets. But now to I have a few minutes to finalize. I will like to just to a little bit of freshening up. Like we spoke of the NDC, where we say this is likely of each country's personal climate action plan, where they outline each country, they pledge on how to reduce this greenhouse gas emission, and the action will take and how to achieve this. Like I mentioned, I mean, I gave you an example from Tanzania. And also we touch base on how the NDC works, where countries now submit the NDC to the United Nations, and they must update and improve in certain period of time. For instance, 5 years for Tanzania and so on for other regions. We also have seen the examples from Tanzania, the NDC, and the global emission trajectory. We also have seen we also touched base the Paris Agreement and that. So without further ado, because my part here is just to lay a foundation for us to understand the market, how it operates, and how it operates generally, and I mean, nitty-gritty of the market generally, in just the foundational, in the simple terms. Allow me now to take this opportunity to welcome our first speaker from the panel. I think who was eagerly waiting to share his presentation. We have like I mentioned earlier, we have four speakers who will be speaking on different angles. Like I said, there will be a speaker who will be speaking on legal challenges and opportunities of the foundation that I gave, but also we'll have a speaker who will be speaking on best practice and trajectory on way forward. How are we going about it? Now, allow me now to introduce our first speaker from Carbon Tanzania, Mr. Azaria Kilimba. Mr. Azaria is a Carbon Tanzania operation manager. Carbon Tanzania is a company here in Tanzania. So Mr. Azaria is a Carbon Tanzania operation manager, and he works extensively with Tanzania forest communities. Mr. Azaria supports the communities to create value in their community-owned natural resources through sustainable management and voluntary carbon. Also, Mr. Azaria, yes, Mr. Azaria has long been dedicated to helping forest communities realize their value, their natural resources. He also worked with MCDI, Enabel, WWF, and other NGOs in rural Tanzania. And I've seen Azaria saw forest communities benefiting considerably from innovative enterprises that valued forest through sustainable timber tourism and non-timber products. Allow me now to welcome Mr. Azaria to share his experience and through working with various communities across Tanzania, where he can provide unique and insight into practical mechanism and how forest and wildlife can become valuable asset to the local communities. Mr. Azaria, karibu, and the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Edie. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Edie, for welcoming me. My name is Azaria Kilimba, as Edie just explained, and I work as an operations manager for CITED or Welcome, which is local company which is Tanzania, and we're working on carbon credit scheme, but particularly on the REDD+ prospect. So we basically work with communities in ensuring forest conservation and making sure there is enough other livelihoods needs, but also support forest protection in a larger scale. Just to begin off, I think I was supposed to be speaking on the fundamentals of carbon markets, key players, within the region, which is a very broad topic. And I would say I'm really sorry that I hadn't really prepared any kind of presentation from this. So much of what I'll be doing is what I know and my experience. So I am talking to and the basic idea for this webinar is to see that coherent in this carbon credit trading. And just to start off, I think Edie just laid a foundation quite well, and potentially by popping that question, do we call this carbon marketers permission to emit or not? And I think I'd rather recoin this question. Can we actually survive currently without any emission? Can we be zero emission from now, that immediate? And I think based from what I know, I think it's utterly impossible. We'll wait for the Q&A session for people to also provide their insights. But I think the way we would look at this space is going through a series of climate change related global meetings that have been happening from the earlier days. Because remember, for a number of conference of parties, a number of discussion has been put around how can we avoid global warming to, at one time it was 1.5 degrees centigrade increment per year, but also dropped to 1 degree centigrade per year without any prior commitment. It's just because it was laid on the economics of how the global governments and global economic frameworks have actually worked. So throughout these discussions, you just sense there is a level of lack of accountability for accountable in avoiding even further emissions. And when you look deeper, you just see the reason why there is no that commitment is just based on the economics and how all these process would have really affected national economies and other developing countries not meeting their global growth to economic development, because at every angle in the process of developing economically, people had to do some extraction of natural resources, and some of these extraction emission that would happen anyway. For those who made a follow-up on the COP28 last year, which was done in Dubai anyway, and we know like the Middle East is one of the leading spaces in globally in the extraction of crude oil and processing of petroleum and diesel, and all these are used to generate a number of energy efficient items that support for manufacturing industries to happen. And one of the biggest questions, and the reason why that COP was quite interesting, I think the global community was really eager to understand what is the position of the COP28 chairman towards avoiding the extraction of fossil fuels. And we all know what the response was. So just reflecting back to that initial introduction, so I'm getting this message that I'm breaking.
Yes, I think your network is
Sorry,
a
I
bit
think
shaky. Yes, yes.
I have a bad internet. I'll try to keep it slow. Yeah, so the reason why there's been this global discussion is are we really saying carbon credits is actually a permission to emit, or is it the current reasonable solution towards zero carbonization in the future? And the discussion can be broad depending on how we look at it, but reflecting back.
No, Mr. Zaria, I think we lost him. Mr. Zaria. Hello? Hello?
Sorry, am I
Yes, you got off
am
a
I
little
still
bit.
online?
Yes, you're
Can you hear
online.
me,
We can
Edie?
hear you now. Yeah, we can hear you now, but we lost you a bit, like a few seconds.
Yeah, I think I had a problem with my internet, but if you can hear me, then I'll be glad to go on. Otherwise, I'll
Yeah,
have to
we can hear you
reconnect.
now.
Sorry. All right, thanks. So as I was saying, I think the bigger discussion is really trying to align the climate change discussion and where the carbon trading scheme actually happened. And you would recall through the Paris Agreement, this was after a series of meetings where at certain level, the global community had to agree on setting a price on carbon emissions. And setting a price on these carbon emissions was simply adapted through a cap and trade model that was actually pioneered in the US back in the 1980s, where it was about setting a cap on these emissions. And whichever corporate exceeds that maximum or minimum emission that was set at a particular level, they will be accountable towards initiating where the excess carbon is actually falling. And this having this carbon cap model instituted within corporates, this is where now it came with a framework where industries who are going to invest on lesser emissions would actually win a market opportunity to trade the carbon emissions or the avoided emissions, excess avoided emissions, to sell them to those who are actually emitting even further. And this can be looked at, was it really a naive process, or is it the best way towards holding these emitters accountable towards a certain level? And I think creating that market opportunity was simply creating an opportunity to bring in the climate change discussion and carbon emission through the global economic frameworks, which actually have been operating between governments, corporates, but based on the buy and sell criteria. So whenever we look at carbon markets, we should have this understanding that the carbon trade model, the carbon crediting scheme, it's all about bringing in a product within an economical framework, but aligning with the climate change discussion. For that, remember, through this process, you have to create a credit. And as you all know, one carbon credit is equivalent to 1 ton of carbon emission, carbon emission equivalent, right? So once you have this product, it's a product that is now tradable. And that's why the mechanism of demand and supply actually comes in, where you are creating an automatic demand for credit, but also there are investments that will allow for producing a product. But going beyond that.
Hello, Mr. Zaria, sorry. Mr. Zaria, sorry, I think I have a proposal. I think we can agree that we are struggling to hear, and I think it's a bit of technical problem, maybe the network and all that. So maybe we can just give you some few minutes, maybe we can sort it out, then we can proceed with you after, maybe after Tajel. Is that okay? Hello? Oh, all right, thank you. I've seen your message. Yes, I've seen your message. So I think that's okay. We can proceed with another speaker so that we can sort out the internet issues, then we can proceed with you later. So without further ado, let me introduce another panelist to today's discussion. Today we have another speaker, Mr. Tajel Urio. Mr. Tajel Urio is a senior managing consultant, climate policy, finance, and carbon markets advisory at South Pole. The South Pole is the world's leading carbon projects expert and climate consultants. Since 2006, it has been a trusted advisor to governments, public sectors, organizations, and businesses on decarbonization, and has used the power of market to help channel climate finance for over 850 projects worldwide. Mr. Urio has over a decade of practical multicultural working experience in climate policy, carbon markets, and energy transition. He has also worked with government, private sector, and NGOs. He is continuing to support the government, businesses, and communities to set up effective carbon projects, policy, and strategies ecosystem. Tajel has been participating in UNFCCC climate negotiations since 2014 to date, with a focus on climate finance and cooperation. In recognition of his climate action efforts, Appalachia State University, USA, has dedicated a redwood tree named the Taj tree in his honor. Allow me now to introduce Mr. Urio on the floor, and we can all hear from what he's presented. Mr. Urio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eddie, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And I'll be speaking on the best practice about the carbon market in the region, but also the opportunities that young people, young lawyers can tap into this big market. So I'll start by saying that even this platform, it's one of the best practice that brings together young people from the region and to discuss the opportunity around the carbon market. But to go further, I'll say the market is big. You do have a compliance carbon market. You do have a voluntary carbon market. And the one which is quite booming now with a lot of opportunities and engagement for legal community, for lawyers, is actually the compliance carbon market, which now operates under the Paris Agreement, and specifically under the Article 6.2 and 6.4, as well as 6.8 of the Paris Agreement. Now, coming into the region, particularly the African region, when we talk about the best practice, we can have a look on the several dimensions. One, I'll say the country readiness, where now you can activate these markets and it's ready to go. But the other side, it's the offtake side, where your country is ready, but also how is it cooperating with other countries under the framework and rule book provided by the Paris Agreement on the Article 6. So I would like to speak about Ghana. Ghana is one of the a country in the region that has made huge steps when it comes to carbon market, particularly the compliance carbon market. And they've done a number of things which serve as the best practice in the region. One is they do have a dedicated framework for carbon markets and the Paris Agreement, which provide rooms for for the voluntary carbon market, but also the compliance carbon market being regulated by the states in a way that it ensure the compliance of Paris Agreement provisions, but also it ensure that the country can account the number of emissions, the amount of emission reduction happening in the country, and that can be recorded into national greenhouse gas inventory, which is managed by the National Carbon Registry. Now, for Ghana, having the framework in place, but also they've established the Carbon Market Office, which is under the EPA. EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency in Ghana. So this CMO or Carbon Market Office provide the leadership and regulatory fronts for the carbon market in the country. And in the framework, together with the leadership under the EPA and the CMO, I'll be using these abbreviations as EPA stands for Environmental Protection Agency in Ghana, but CMO is a Carbon Market Office in Ghana as well. So under the CMO and the framework itself, they've provided the list of eligible type of project that can qualify for the authorization and approvals under the Paris Agreement. And that means that they'll be ready to authorize the transfer of that credit in terms of ownership to another country. How does this work? So under the Paris Agreement, you do have NDC. And NDC is a national determined contribution where the country pledged that they're going to implement something both conditionally and unconditionally to contribute into the achievement of the Paris Agreement. So every country has communicated NDC to UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, as part of their contribution toward achieving the Paris Agreement. Now, for the developing country, including our region, this kind of a commitment, they are normally conditional and unconditional. And it's conditional subjective to the means of implementation. And the means of implementation encompass finance, technology, but also the technical know-how on how to achieve that. So from the introduction where it spoke about the NDC of Tanzania and the ambition to reduce 30 to 35 emission economic-wide, a part of that commitment is conditional. And from the conditionality there, from that conditionality is where you bring the opportunity of the Paris Agreement and particularly the Article 6 and carbon markets. It works in a way that, for instance, if a country says that they are going to decarbonize their public transport sector at a certain percent, but they can only do that at the conditions that they get means of implementation. Now, when it's setting the framework and the eligibility for the Article 6 eligible project in a country under the carbon market framework in a given country, for instance, in Ghana, you would say that we attract investment which will be eligible for carbon credits and all carbon project under this type of the project, EV, let's say, or a green public mobility. So anyone coming into a country investing into green public transport, let's say EV, mass public transport, they can also benefit from the carbon finance. That means they are bringing the means of implementation. of which without that ambition could not happen. So this is the effect of carbon finance coming into that. And in return, the credit that will be generated from such a conditional project will be transferred to buyer. So the one who will buy the credit from such kind of project will be the owner of the assets. And that's how it works. So from this kind of compliance carbon market is where you support the ambition of emission reduction in country. And for the buyers, it's not like once you buy, you have the free right to pollute. No, you also have to account your emission reduction, and you should demonstrate that on annual basis, you are reducing your emission, your emission from different economic sectors as you continue buying and contributing to sustainable development in other countries. So it's not a case like once you buy, you can just get a free ride, speed, and pollute. It comes with some obligation in terms of continuous emission reduction from your economy as well. Now, from this, you do also have what we call in the compliance, you do have also domestic compliance carbon market, where companies, for instance, from Singapore, where they do have this domestic compliance carbon market, they can also buy credit from other countries where they do have a bilateral, where there is a bilateral between Singapore and that country. For this case, Ghana also has a bilateral relationship and cooperative agreement under the Paris Agreement for carbon market. So they can also buy carbon credit from Ghana and get the offset of up to 5% of their tax obligation at annual basis. So this is how it comes. Now, what is different from, that also we can take as an best practice in Ghana, when they started this CMO, the Carbon Market Office, it's not, there is no, it's not mentioned in the law, the principal act that established the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, or the carbon market is not there as well. But based on the agents, based on the opportunity happening in the world now and how the carbon market is booming, they took a sovereign decision to start and frame the framework, which provide the legal ground for the carbon market operation in the country. And now they are working on the amendment of the EPA Act, where they're going to include all these other things. That the framework will get more, legal power. But they just started with having the framework and established this institutional structure by the framework, and of which now the Principal Act amendment will also put that into legislation. Why does this look like, as a best practice? From the business perspective, however, we really want a guarantee, but also from the business perspective, it attracted a lot of traction from other countries, particularly the buyers and developers, that the country is ready, but also it shows determination that they are looking at this market as an important aspect, as an important tool for the attaining their sustainable development, ambition under their NDC, but also from their national development plans. And and a lot of countries from the region, they've been actually engaging Ghana to learn on how they did it, but also how they are managing their national carbon registry. From this, another good practice from Ghana that I can say here, it's an establishment of national carbon registry, which is fully functional, and it's operating under CMO. For you to work well under the carbon market, particularly the compliance one, you should have a robust national carbon registry where you're going to register all the carbon project being implemented in your respective country, and be able to adjust the transfer from the national greenhouse gas inventory. This is another important element if a country want to excel well and attract investment, particularly under the Paris Agreement. They should also have updated national greenhouse gas inventory, of which it avoids the risk of having double counting or, double counting the emission reduction once generated in your country and once you're required to transfer it to a buying country. Another aspect which serves as a good best practice for this, again, it's Ghana, is the bilateral relations that do exist on the framework of Article 6. So the Article 6.2 provide a voluntary opportunity for parties to cooperate and be able to trade the Article 6 units or ITMOs. The long form of ITMOs is International Transferred Mitigation Outcomes. So on a voluntary basis, but it establishes what we call cooperative approach, where countries sign an MOU and then implementation agreement on how this cooperative is going to work. So far, Ghana is leading the region in terms of having several bilateral agreement under Article 6. And they do have, I think, they do have bilateral with Swiss, Singapore, Sweden. They're also discussing with South Korea and others. So this, what does that mean? It means they have expanded the scope of opportunities in the country, and they've expanded the room to get a lot of players, competing players who want carbon credit or Article 6 units from the country at a competitive price. This sets it apart when it comes to financial flow toward the country, because if a country is depending more on the voluntary carbon market, where the prices are not uniform, there's a lot of uncertainty on the pricing, and currently the price is quite low, and it's much lower compared to what compliance carbon market offer. So you find that now the carbon finance flow that will be going to Ghana per credit, there'll be a huge difference between them and other countries that they are looking more into voluntary carbon market, or they are lagging behind in terms of preparation toward attracting the bilateral agreement, but also put in place the required legislations, frameworks, and institutions that attract investors and buyers' confidence into the systems. The other thing that I can say as as a best practice, and before going into another example, I'll say for the region, East Africa, we're also making some progress, not at the speed that as a business community wants, but we're making a huge steps compared to many other countries in Africa. Our countries, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, they do have bilateral agreement in place. Yes, and we are yet to full utilize these opportunities because of so many other regulatory things pending from the national governments, and I hope this will be done and be able to attract these huge opportunities. The other flagship best practice that I can share with you, it's one of the project in Thailand as South Pole, where we are working with the private sector in Bangkok, city of Bangkok, Thailand, and by decarbonizing the public transport. So we're introducing the EV buses, and we've already done that. I think last year we made the first Article 6 transaction out of that project, of which it gave us a bit of competitive advantage in the market that we do have experience also on the this new market of Article 6, and we know how things work. But why is it a best practice? Because it's a public transport, emission reduction project, which could not be possible without having the carbon finance from the Article 6. Not even the voluntary carbon market could not really provide the huge finance required for that project to kick off and be able to, to operate and achieve the results that are in place at the moment. So this is one of the best practice. And I hope that, in position that we do have, and in our capacities and young people, will be able also to use our voices and raise, and advise our governments on the opportunities that comes with the Paris Agreement, particularly the Article 6, but also the readiness which is required at the national level to put in place the necessary, legislations and institutional structure that can attract the confidence to investors and anyone who want to invest into carbon projects. That would be, contributing to achievement of the NDC. Now, let me go into, before going into the opportunity that you young people we can take from this, Paris Agreement, the carbon market, I'll say another best practice is one work that we did at Southport with Gold Standard. Gold Standard is one of the major, standard in the world certifying the carbon project. We worked with the Gold Standard on the regulation tracker, so tracking regulation from different countries, and see how they complement or they attract the business. But let me share the link here. Yes, so we did this work with the Gold Standard, trying to track the regulation, what is happening in different countries around the world. So you can see several regulations and what are the provision into that regulation. How you can do a quick assessment, maybe if this much business friendly, attractive or not. So but that's just a snapshot of what is in detail about the regulation. If you require more detail about these regulations, I think you can contact me, of course, and discuss more about that. Now, on the last part of my presentation, it's on opportunities. First, I'll say there are a number of opportunities that government should activate, but also there are a number of opportunities that young people can take in this market. And I'll say one is to provide the legal investment guide, in a given country. It works whether it doesn't mean if you are a resident of South Sudan, you just need to focus on South Sudan. You can also work on this on other countries in the region and be able to attract business toward your bank account. Well, so why I'm saying the business investment guide, you can do the analysis of the NDC and be able to determine what is conditional and what is not conditional. For every conditional, emission reduction target in NDC is a business opportunity. So for a legal person, and I'm glad that I'm married to a legal one, a lawyer. So you can just do an assessment and see if the country NDC says we're going to we're committed to reduce emission reduction from the agriculture by introducing maybe a certain type of technology. Now go into a deep analysis, a legal analysis, and develop a legal opinion or whatever on how you can invest into such a specific sector and what are the opportunities, apart from the carbon finance, what are other investment opportunities tied to that, emission reduction targets? So when you present this for anyone, particularly for the business community and investors, that would be a really rare gemstone that you can, attract some business flow to your firm or at personal level. But also supporting the national government to put in place required legislations and framework that define the carbon market, the carbon rights, and how we can, best attract business in our country. There's a huge knowledge gap that do exist at the national government, but also, the private sector, the community. So they need to understand this. So my advice to you be, first of all, invest into knowledge, try to learn more about the carbon market. There's huge resources. including our website that I've shared. There's a lot of resources and the publication that you can learn about the carbon market and how to activate it. So you can provide this legal advisory, but also technical advisor on the carbon and how we can attract investment. For the non-state actors, you can also advise them. Most of them, they're implementing projects that they don't see or they are not aware that this project can generate carbon credit. And then, so this goes to NGOs, goes to private sector, government agencies. They implement a number of projects that contribute into emission reduction. In one way or another, they're also qualified for carbon projects. So it's your role now to unpack and present this opportunity that the project brings into carbon market and be able to get your fee out of that. It could be on a commission basis, it could be on any other way. It depends on your negotiations. So I leave that to you. The other important and where we really need the legal players is on contracts. And these contracts and agreements from the state level or on this bilateral engagement where you negotiate a number of things, we really need a key player there from the legal field, but also on the contact between business and business and communities. Most of our community, they don't really understand these details. And even if you go and share the opportunity to, let's say, a certain NGO that, you're implementing this project, clean cooking, you are bringing, cleaner solution for several communities. But do you know that you can also attract carbon credit and carbon finance from that? They also need the legal support on how they can negotiate a better terms with with other players in the market and be able to get the benefit out of that solution, in addition to the grants or other investment that they are making into that. The other opportunity that I see, it's support on the due diligence. So you find that we, like at Southport, we are a global company. We don't have presence in each and every country, and we meet several players and partners who want to work with us. But we need now legal peoples and firms that they can help us on doing the due diligence on several fronts. And this is also one of the booming actually opportunity in Ghana, where I have also met some friendship with some, lean brothers and sisters in Ghana as they're working on this, area, just doing a due diligence for companies, for resident partners. And this is something that we can also leverage and, create a small business that can also grow into a big business in the future. The other one I'll say it's on compliance and awareness. So as the country proceed and continue to put in place the regulations in place, and this is going to be a trend to all countries, I suppose, because there are also requirement from the Paris Agreement to establish a national carbon registry. So now for anyone implementing a carbon project, be it a voluntary or compliance, they need to do some national compliances that they also do need a legal, players to support them when it comes to such kind of compliance, and what are the translation of the law, both on the tax fronts, but also from the environmental integrity fronts. The last but not least, it's awareness. As I said, this is a huge opportunity. Several people, community, government officials, they are not much aware about this, and particularly the practical part of it. So we have the a kind of voluntary obligations and a business obligation to bring this awareness into masses and translate that effort into business opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tajiro Rio, and I think we will agree with you that we had a very, very insightful, and I think to add, I think most of the questions I've seen here, which we'll address it later, but I wanted to address something on top of what you mentioned. There is a question on what is Article 6 of Paris Agreement. and want to ask what is Article 6. So I just wanted, before we move forward to another speakers, just want to share something on this regard so that we can move. The Article 6 of the one that was mentioned, it's Paris Agreement. This is Paris Agreement. I think you can all see my screen. Tajal, I think you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Yeah,
Proceed.
so the one who asked about the Article 6 of Paris Agreement, this is the Paris Agreement, where now the Article 6, let me go to Article 6, Article 4, Article 6. This is Article 6. Article 6, specifically the focus now is on 6.2 and 6.4 and the like. But Article 6, it provides for parties to recognize, pursue voluntary cooperation of the national determined contribution to allow for high ambition in the mitigation and adaptation action to promote sustainable development and environmental integrity. So I'll urge everyone, of the participant to go and read further of this article because it's so broad. But in summary, it's just the article which provide for the mechanism now how these countries have to cooperate and how these countries now have to transfer those credits and the cooperation in between. And something that to add, Tajal, I think there is a good development in Tanzania part, because this is the regulation we have. Initially, the regulation was introduced in October 2022. But we had the amendment in 2023, which introduced several amendments, including adding the words mechanisms, as you can see here, the mechanism. Also, it defines what is mechanisms. It defines here the convention to mean United Nations Framework Convention, which one was not there before. It defined the mechanism now to include Convention to Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement, but also, yeah, to have the national carbon and a few other definition and others. So, like you said earlier, the topic is so broad. I will urge every participant to go in their respective regions to dig further, because the laws given in this area is so new. So most of the things are more of self-learning, like the law is new, so I mean it never been regulated before, so it's just more of self-learning to read the law and yeah, to understand and advise accordingly. I think I've seen the hand from Stephen Slaney, and I will give you the hand later. Maybe if you have something to ask Mr. Rio, I will give you an opportunity later. Mr. Rio, I think you can be attentive to that. For this, to this time now, we have seen the foundation of the market. We have seen the fundamentals, then we have seen the best practice from Mr. Uriel. I think now it's a good time now to to go through the challenges, the legal challenges and opportunities. And on this part of legal challenges and opportunities, we have another speaker. We have another speaker. We have another speaker who will be speaking on legal challenges and opportunities within the carbon markets, including compliance, verification, and cross-border transactions. We have Ms. Louise Masu. Forgive me if I say Miss, if that's not the case, forgive me. But Ms. Louise is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya with over 12 years of experience working in energy sector on projects in Kenya and other countries on the African continent. She has worked for or consulted for various notable public and private sector organizations, such as COMESA, the African School of Regulation, the EU Technical Assistance Facility for Sustainable Energy, Strathmore University, and others. Louise is currently lead consultant as well as energy policy and regulation lead at Genis Consulting and Consultants firm based in Nairobi. Genis Consulting provides specialized advisory, research, and training services on policy and regulation in energy and extractives, projects and infrastructures. public-private partnership, project finance, and related thematic areas of e-mobility, climate change, among others. Allow me to give the floor to Louise to proceed from here. Louise, the floor is yours. Karibu.
Thank you so much, Edie. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to the speakers that have gone before me. Yourself, Azaria, Tajil, you've really laid a good foundation to the presentation that I prepared today. As you've said, this is a very wide field. It's evolving by the day, and a lot of personal initiative is needed to keep abreast of the trends, of the new information, of new knowledge. But the good thing is that there's a lot of information out there. There's lots of free courses, there's webinars practically every day that you can listen in and equip yourself with the right knowledge and information to really exploit the opportunities that are there. And I will be touching on some of these opportunities, some of which already have been touched on by the previous speaker. Can you see my screen, if I may ask?
Yes, I can. We can see the thing. Yeah.
You can see my screen. Okay, this is great. Just a moment, please. I seem to have a small hitch. Just share that again, please. Sharing. Okay, great. I believe that you cannot. Oh my, sorry. I'm so sorry about that. Sorry. Screen. All right, this should be the right one. Yes. Apologies for that hitch.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Fantastic. Thank you for your patience. All right, as has been mentioned by the speaker, I'm going to be touching on some of the legal challenges and opportunities within carbon markets, touching a bit on compliance and verification. It's not possible to go in depth. It was a bit of a challenge to see how to scope it, but I have endeavored, and I'm sure that we will walk this journey together as we learn from one another. So this is the outline of my presentation. We'll touch briefly on legal frameworks, looking at it in the global context. Part 2, mention of measurement, reporting, verification. What does it entail in as far as we can touch on in this presentation? What are the challenges in this space as well? It's not all shiny days. There are also some challenges that need to be overcome. As we've said, this is a new emerging area where the new areas, the legal frameworks are yet to be properly determined. There can be room for abuse and the like. So there's some challenges and dark clouds, but this can be overcome. Part 4, we'll look a little more into the legal verification of carbon credits. Part 5, we look a little bit on cross-border transactions, which will also touch on emission trading schemes briefly. And finally, we will have a conclusion. So without further ado, and this has been touched on by the previous speaker, looking at legal frameworks and putting them within the global context. Now, the previous speaker, Taji, has actually mentioned about a regulatory index that has been developed by South Pole. And as we seem to be of the same mind, because this is actually my first slide of the presentation. So this is a carbon markets regulations tracker. And they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Now, if you look at this representation here.
I think the slides, we are stuck on the first slides where we have the title.
Oh, wow. Sorry about that. Why is that the case? Let me attempt to share again. Apologies. Let me attempt to share that. All right. Are they moving now? Any movement, kindly?
Yes, we can see the presentation outline. Yes, now we can see.
Oh, great. Yes. So that's what I was going over, and that's the flow of the presentation. You can see the next slide. Edie, we are good?
Not yet. Maybe.
Oh, wow. What's happening?
Relax. So after you share the screen, just do the presentation mode on the tab that you shared the screen.
Okay.
The one at the bottom on your right, I think.
Yes. No, that yes.
Is this better?
Not really. Can you go to next slide if it's
Okay.
no.
Wow. Let me try. Sorry for this. Let me give this another last shot. No, why this is the case. Let me put it on the screen. Okay. All right. Any better?
Yeah. Now you can go.
Better. Yes, better.
Oh, fantastic. So now you can see a map on the screen?
Yes, a map, legal framework, yes, global context.
Fantastic. So this, as I said, a picture speaks a thousand words. And I'll just pick up from what Taji mentioned and talked about the lack of legal frameworks. If you look at the African continent there, you can see that there's quite some work that's been done in the East African region with either regulations, be it an act or regulations that touch on carbon markets. So you have Kenya, you have Tanzania, you have Uganda, moving on down into Southern Africa there. And the rest of the continent, sub-Sahara, you can see to the far west, we have activity in Ghana. Now, the northern part, that would be the MENA region, Middle East and Northern Africa. There's also some activity there, but the focus largely, I would say, if we look at sub-Saharan Africa, you can see there's quite a lot of work to be done. If you look at South America, you look at the EU, you look at Asia Pacific, there's also quite some movement there on regulatory frameworks in those countries and that region. So progress is being made, but more still needs to be done on the African continent. And as Taji did say, this has been recently developed by the South Pole Carbon Markets Regulations Tracker. It's a very, very useful. This version I'm showing you last updated on the 7th of September. So it's quite current. All right, now we can move to measurement, reporting, and verification. I trust we're together on the slides. Thank you. All right. So when we talk about measurement, what exactly is being measured? We'll talk about reporting and verification. So measurement, we need to measure the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are being reduced by a specific activity over a period of time. If we're talking about carbon projects, we're talking, as the previous speaker has talked about, use of EVs or the planting of forests, etc., then you need to have a way to measure the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are being reduced over a period of time. And you also, M can also be used to refer to monitoring. That is, you measure and continually keep monitoring the activity and the emissions reduction. Now, R involves reporting of those measurements that have been taken to an accredited third party. So now that third party is the one that will review the data that has been presented and verify that the information or the data that has been provided is actually accurate, and thereby a certified carbon credit can be issued. So these accrediting parties are usually independent entities. There are several. I can't quite think of, some names are disappearing from my head, but I believe we have Vera. There are several others that are third parties that can accredit and certify that indeed certain activities have reduced carbon emissions and therefore qualify for carbon credit issuance. Right, now in the MRV conversation, as you said, this is a newly evolving area. There's so much that is not clear. There's a lot of need for capacity building, particularly on the African continent, and even just generally around the world. It's still really evolving. And there's need to be clear in exactly how carbon credits are generated, how they are verified, and how they are offset. And the previous speaker has spoken about mechanisms that are put in place nationally to ensure that projects are actually registered with the carbon registry, to ensure that you cannot just start some random project. It actually has to be registered. This is also captured in the recently adopted carbon market regulations in Kenya. Transparency. So I'm not sure if many of you are aware, but there has been some discussion in the international arena about whether there is a transparency really in how these carbon credits are being issued, how the carbon credits are being counted. Previous speakers also spoken about double counting. If say a country it's Kenya, is going to be saying that it has reduced X amount of carbon dioxide equivalent, then that would be accredited to Kenya and it should not then be counted by another country. Otherwise, then that would be double counting. So all those need to be clear. There needs to be transparency. There also needs to be transparency and clarity because some of these agreements that are entered into, many of them actually are legally binding contracts. An example is energy emission reduction purchase agreements, whereby you have parties agreeing with a party agreeing with another party to allow the delivery of carbon credits from one party to another party. And just like with all contracts, you need to have the terms agreed beforehand. What is the price of the carbon credit in that particular contract? What is the volume of greenhouse gas emissions that is going to be reduced? So the metrics to measure the greenhouse gas emissions need to be determined and agreed by the parties beforehand. And right there, you can see there are actually opportunities. If we're talking about contracts, you need lawyers there. So how many of you are actually aware about these agreements? This is just one of the kinds of agreements that are operating within this carbon market space. So there's an opportunity also for commercial lawyers. So if I can give you an example of exactly how large these contracts can be, we have one example that I've provided there that was signed between the Carbon Partnership Facility and the government of Mozambique for $50 million for a carbon reduction equivalent to 10 million tons of CO2. And the term of that agreement is 2019 to 2024. And so what happens is the government of Mozambique is to engage in activities like forest conservation, climate smart agriculture, thereby reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So you can see the amounts of monies that are being discussed in this arena are really, really huge and can have a huge impact for emerging markets and emerging economies. So now, as we've said, it's not all sunny days. There are challenges and there's some dark clouds, but these can be overcome. So what I put here on the screen is just an example of an article titled Mapped, the Impacts of Carbon Offset Projects Around the World. So there are certain challenges that arise in the carbon market space. If we are talking about the use of land, say planting forests, there can be challenges because when you're planting these forests, does it mean then that you're displacing people? How are they being displaced? Where are they going to be moved to? Some of these populations are sometimes indigenous populations. So here again, we have a representation on a map. And on this map, what you can see are some samples of areas where there have been challenges related to carbon offset projects, where they may have been harm to indigenous peoples and local communities, where there are instances, reported instances of emissions being overstated, sometimes illegal land use, and also food production can be affected. If, for instance, like I've said, you want to put up a forest or put up a particular kind of project and that is being used to grow food for consumption, you can see that then has significant implications. So you can get this interactive map from the carbonbrief.org. I believe this presentation will be shared. I'll also be attaching some references that you can use to really delve a little more. And here's another opportunity for lawyers, where there are violations of human rights, for instance, then lawyers can step in to ensure that any legal rights being enforced are being not being adhered to or being respected, are duly respected through enforcing law, whether it is through filing lawsuits nationally or in international law courts. So as you can see, it's not only limited to commercial lawyers. Those also in the litigation space, you do have room as well to exercise your skills and acquire more knowledge. So some of the challenges also that coming up in the carbon market space, terminologies like greenwashing. You know, you hear companies saying that they're carbon neutral, or they're using carbon accounting methods that are opaque, you know, or some of the projects that they're using or claiming to be offsetting carbon credits from are quote unquote possibly dubious, possibly they're not registered, or there could be underlying issues. Possibly if it's a land related project, how was the land acquired? So there's lots of challenges that arise in this space, but in the challenges are also the opportunities. There are also opportunities. So the next part, we can look at the legal nature of verified carbon credits. It sounds a little bit amorphous, you know, carbon. What is the status really of verified carbon credits, really? And what is it exactly? So a verified carbon credit represents a certification that a holder has either directly or indirectly removed or reduced from the atmosphere 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent, in line with certain applicable rules that are set. And this claimed removal or reduction of CO2 has to be, as I mentioned earlier, certified or verified by an independent third party. As has also been mentioned previously, we have voluntary carbon markets. So there's a lot of agreements being entered into outside any particular regulatory framework. And with these kinds of international transactions, the volumes or the amount of monies involved, legal certainty really needs to be adhered to. But as we've said, this is an evolving space. It's still a work in progress. So maybe a little more on what is ongoing in the international space with regard to bring about some kind of legal certainty on the nature of verified carbon credits. We have UNIDROIT, that's the International Institute for the Unification of Private Law, which is an intergovernmental organization that looks into modernizing, harmonizing, coordinating private and particular commercial law as between states and groups of states. And as we've heard in the previous presentations, and I've said, a lot of these transactions that are taking place with regard to carbon markets involve that different private parties across national lines, international lines, states, MOUs being signed, some of which could be legally binding in nature. So it's really important that as we proceed forward, there be certain principles or guidelines that the legal fraternity can put in place to ensure that the carbon market is properly operated, and there's confidence that's created by stakeholders in that particular space. So what has happened is that UNIDROIT has a specific project that is really looking into the legal nature of verified carbon credits. And the aim of this project is to try and support the development of a well-functioning market. As we've said, What we're trying to do here is to see the Paris Agreement fulfilled and see that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are achieved, one of which is climate action, and so many other goals that can be achieved through carbon markets. So why delve into this BCC project by UNIDROIT? Why does it matter? You know, for us as East Africans, why does it matter? It should matter because a significant share of the projects that generate these verified carbon credits are located in developing or emerging economies. That will be what is sometimes called the Global South in Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia Pacific, and also in South America. So we really need to be aware so that we can take advantage of these opportunities. And as has been said by the previous speaker, there are opportunities to work in policy and regulation, advising the government, advising private players to ensure that any contracts or agreements that are entered into are not skewed, right? Because there's lots of capital flows that can benefit emerging markets in this space. So statistics, we say yes, a large, significant number. Let's look at some statistics. And just looking at between 2016 and 2021, statistics show that the carbon market has grown exponentially, 30% compounded growth between 2016 and 2021. And this figure is expected to grow 15-fold by 2030. But now take a look at this. Out of the total credits issued worldwide in that period, 11 are from African countries, only 11. And these can be attributed to a few large projects, one of which I will show you in the next slide. Africa is not really fulfilling its potential insofar as benefiting from carbon credits. As we've seen, it can be a very good source for financial flows that can benefit the continent. But we are operating or generating really at only 2% of the annual potential of this continent. So there's really work to be done and benefits that we can accrue from this space, but we need to be well armed, we need to be knowledgeable, we need to be well versed, we need to be well placed, we need to know where the opportunities lie so that we can harness them. So I've mentioned some of these few projects that have been harnessed on this continent can be attributed to just a few. This is just one of them. It's pretty well known. It's in the energy sector in Kenya, where the state-owned generation company KenGen has developed a very impressive carbon credit portfolio. And just to highlight, this portfolio was developed under the Clean Development Mechanism. That's under the Kyoto Protocol, which has already been mentioned is due to be retired. But a lot of these carbon credits come from that mechanism under that protocol. And the carbon credits there you see in the region of 5,057,253. And all of these are from renewable energy projects, wind project, geothermal projects. You also have hydros there. So there's a lot that can be done with proper management, proper knowledge. I do know that KenGen has done a lot of work and has a specific department that looks at their carbon credit portfolio, engages with parties. So knowledge is power, and that's one of the reasons we're having this webinar. We can take advantage of these opportunities. The previous speaker also talked about having an attractive investment climate or being investment ready. What is the state of the carbon market readiness on the continent? And I found this attractiveness, VCM Investment Attractiveness Index. You can see the link there. I believe the presentation will be shared. Interestingly, it shows that in terms of attractiveness to put up or to invest in these projects, Kenya is number 1. There is Ghana at number 4. And I've just listed a few of the other African countries there. We can see Uganda, we can see Rwanda as well. And then you might ask, what metrics did they use really, to determine that this country has a good investment climate for carbon markets? Some of the things they looked at are the the regulatory readiness. For instance, does the country have a specific regulation to govern carbon markets? They also looked at the opportunities available there, the people in the country, the general investment climate, environmentally, what the state of the country is like. So if you look at this index, you can actually expand it and it can give you quite some interesting information. So as we've said, this information can really help you position yourself and see, okay, so Kenya is an investment friendly country insofar as carbon markets are concerned. Ghana, what opportunities can I harness? What businesses are there? Do they need advisory service, legal advisory services? And you can position yourself accordingly. If I can just take you back to the UNIDRA, what I talked about, legal verification of carbon credits. So where are things now internationally insofar as that is concerned? So this process began in 2022 when ISDA, some of you who work in banking perhaps might be aware of ISDA, or in the Securities Exchange, International Swaps and Derivatives Association, submitted a proposal to UNIDRA and says it's important that the legal nature of verified carbon credits be looked into. And UNIDRA found this to be an important proposal and put it in the work program with high priority. And so far, UNIDRA has held 2 exploratory workshops last year and has also incorporated sister organizations like UNCITRAL, United Nations Center for International Trade Law, and the Hague Conference on Private International Law to carry on discussions in working group sessions, which have been held in 2023, 2024, one just early in September, and the next slated in for 2025. And the outcome ideally should be a model law potentially. What some of yes, please.
Sorry to interrupt. I mean, I've texted you. While you continue, I've texted something.
All right. So, all right. Sorry, is this on phone, moderator?
I was trying to text you something. I think you have seen it.
Unfortunately, no. Is it about time?
Yes.
Let me then quickly wind up. I'm almost winding up. All right. So these are some of the issues that the workshop is looking at. Key concepts. We've talked about what about transferring VCCs? How is it done? The applicable law. What happens if maybe a private party goes into insolvency? So this is the work that is being discussed. There are other opportunities I would like to mention here. Members of the working group of UNIDRA are legal professionals. And you can go to the website and you'll have a look. There are actually no members of that working group from Africa. All of those legal professionals you see there are from either Europe or the Americas, South America, but members no. We do have observers though, and this is one way in which participants from Africa can take part. But you can see there is a knowledge gap, as has been mentioned. And so there's need for us to arm ourselves with right information to be involved in these important conversations. So I'm just going to quickly wind up, but talking about emissions trading schemes and their implication on cross-border transactions. These trading schemes are largely active in Europe. Europe is the first region that had their own emissions trading scheme set up in 2005. And conversations have been ongoing as to whether other countries in Africa, I know in Kenya that has been brought up, but this can have implications on foreign direct investment, because what it means, it puts a price on carbon, it makes it more expensive. So investors will look at the country and see, this will be particularly expensive to invest in this country. And thereby they may look for other countries that do not have maybe emissions trading schemes and the like. So that's something to think about. So in conclusion, I'll just say that there are so many initiatives that are ongoing currently. In Kenya, I can mention to you that we have the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, which has developed a carbon market guidebook for Kenyan enterprises. And it's really good. It's available online. I've also put the link there that you would be able to see. And this is a guidebook that talks about, gives you information about what these terms, some of these terms you're talking about, carbon projects. How do you structure a project? What does verification mean? How do you, what are the sales channels? So this book is available. And whereas it's particular to Kenya, I think it's still a useful tool that can be used for others in the region. Continentally and regionally, we also have initiatives by the African Union, which has just recently concluded a multi-stakeholder conference on carbon markets in July in Ethiopia. We have also the Eastern African Carbon Markets Alliance, which includes all the countries that you see there: Burundi, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, Sudan, Uganda. I think I repeated one country there. Apologies for that. So there are lots of initiatives, lots of knowledge and information out there. I will leave it at that for now. Thank you so much, moderator and colleagues. Let's keep engaging. We can connect on LinkedIn and via email as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Louise. Like you said, I think more discussion will be engaged later on LinkedIn. I've seen Tajal have shared his handle and your handle. So for the attendees, we can proceed with the discussion maybe later. Allow me now to introduce our last speaker, Mr. Freddy Kibagendi, who is an associate at DL Piper Africa, Kenya, IKM Advocates. Mr. Freddy is an advocate in projects, energy and structuring practice in DL Piper Africa, Kenya. And he is an experienced project lawyer, having been involved in various cross-border transactions in energy, infrastructure, and public-private partnership and mining sector. But also his expertise also extends to advising lenders and debtors on various aspects on restructure and insolvency. His experience also includes advising on carbon sequestration projects, organic and inorganic waste management projects, and renewable power projects, including wind, solar, geothermal, hydro, and biomass. In addition, being an advocate of Kenya, Fred is up to coming thought leader in fields of projects of energy and periodically contributing to the Business Daily and leading business newspaper in Kenya. Freddie, the floor is yours. We're expecting to hear from you on the forecast of the future of carbon markets 2024 and beyond. Karibu.
Eddie. So as Eddie had mentioned, I'll be taking you through a forecast of the future of carbon markets from 2024 and beyond, both within the East African context as well as just generally, or rather globally. So in the interest of time, I'll try to keep it as short as possible, aiming to be done in 15 minutes, 60-minute stops, just to allow room for any questions that the attendees might have for the speakers we've had today. So this is just a general outline of what my presentation will cover. I won't spend so much time going through the contents, as we'll be covering it moving forward. Just to start us off, what we're expecting to see is that there will definitely be a lot of growth in the voluntary carbon markets. And according to the Task Force on Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets report from 2021, the demand for voluntary carbon markets is increasing steadily and is expected to grow 15 times by 2030. This, of course, is being driven by net zero commitments that are being made by corporate entities. The idea behind it being that companies or businesses are increasingly being held accountable for the impacts that their operations have on the environment. And because as things currently stand, there is no silver bullet that can be used to solve the climate challenges we're facing, voluntary carbon markets sort of present an avenue for companies to be able to purchase these carbon credits that they can use to offset emissions that they cannot eliminate through operational challenges at the moment. And then the demand for carbon credits is also being seen because there are new emerging markets emerging. So whereas in the past, the traditional markets for carbon credits were the US and Europe, increasingly we are seeing countries in Asia, in the Middle East, and even in Latin America being interested in buying carbon credits so as to offset their own emissions. Then there's also the trend of individuals buying carbon credits in order to offset their own emissions. Examples of this would be billionaires like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and even celebrities like Taylor Swift when they're on tour. And the main reason why they acquire the carbon credits is to offset the emissions that are generated by their use of private jets in the movements. So in relation to African countries, carbon markets present an opportunity that can unlock billions to finance the needs of African economies while expanding energy access, creating jobs, protecting biodiversity, as well as driving climate action. As Luis showed, KenGen is one good example of an entity that has an amazing track record in terms of renewable energy. And by them generating carbon credits and selling them to the market, they're in essence able to recoup some of the investment they have made into their renewable power projects. So we have the African Carbon Markets Initiative, which was established at COP27 in 2022. And it aims to have African countries producing 300 million carbon credits annually by 2030 and 1.5 billion credits annually by 2050. So various countries have signed up to the African Carbon Markets Initiative, including Kenya, Burundi, Rwanda, and the likes. And the next trend that we expect to see is the adoption of regulations for carbon markets. So for quite a long period of time, the voluntary carbon markets were self-regulating, and that led to calls for national carbon market frameworks to be established so as to address various concerns that were arising in relation to carbon integrity of the carbon markets and the carbon credits that were being generated from various carbon projects. So increasingly, we're seeing countries putting in place regulations that are aimed to govern carbon projects, as well as the trading of the carbon credits generated. Just to give, to mention a few examples. So Tanzania was the first country within East Africa to put in place carbon market regulations. It published the Environmental Management, Control and Management of Carbon Trading Regulations in 2022. Then we had Rwanda launch its National Carbon Market Framework in 2023, and Kenya gazetted the Climate Change Carbon Market Regulations earlier this year in 2024. Uganda, on its part, currently has Climate Change Act that creates sort of, or rather allows for carbon trading to take place, but it still does not have the requisite regulations that would give, or rather that would be used to operationalize the act. Similarly, in Burundi and South Sudan, there are currently no regulations that have been developed yet. But we're expecting to see more and more countries adopt regulations. And these regulations are intended to build the confidence of different market players in that particular carbon market. So on the next trend, we're expecting to see diversification of carbon projects. So in essence, we'll see more and more different kinds of carbon projects coming into play. So traditionally, nature-based solutions that involves issues to do with reforestation, afforestation, peatland restoration, conservation of grasslands, conservation of mangrove forests, and the likes, have been a very popular method for generating carbon credits. And also we've seen renewable energy projects as another viable method for the generation of carbon credits. But currently, as technology continues to advance, there's increased investment in technological methods of carbon removal. So that's the carbon capture, utilization, and storage, whereby carbon emissions that are generated from industrial processes are actually captured, stored, and in certain instances, they can be repurposed to be used in a different process. And that in particular offers a very viable way of reducing emissions, specifically in what we call the hard to abate industries. So that's, for example, the cement industry, the steel manufacturing industry, or even the petrochemicals industry, whereby in as much as we need those outputs, I mean, we need cement for construction, we need steel for construction as well, and we currently need petrochemicals as a source for energy. it is currently very hard for them to produce or be productive without having some level of emissions. And so in those cases, investment in technology that helps these sectors is becoming a new area, or rather a new kind of carbon project that we're increasingly going to see in the markets. And another issue is in relation to the prices of carbon credits. So the supply for, currently as it stands, the supply of carbon credits is expected to decline while the demand is increasing. And what that is going to do is that the carbon prices will, the price of the carbon credits are currently increasing and they will continue to increase. And so these prices, they generally vary depending on the project type. So for example, the nature-based projects currently fetch a higher price in the market compared to other traditional project types. And based on different studies, it's expected that the price of these nature-based carbon credits will be at least 3 times worth more in 2025 than they were in 2022. And then as I've said, for some of these new emerging technologies, that's for the carbon capture, utilization, and storage, the credits that are being generated from them are expected to fetch a much higher price in the market. And in fact, currently, some of these are already selling within a price range of 350 to 400 USD metric ton. So the next trend that we're going to cover is in relation to the issue of focusing on high quality carbon credits. And what essentially this is about is that over time, there has been quite a lot of scrutiny on the quality of carbon credits that are being generated. And there's now a shift towards having credits that are certified by reputable standards and that offer additional benefits. For example, conservation of biodiversity, or even a social development. And what's happening is that the buyers of carbon credits are becoming more and more sophisticated, and they sort of want to have a very clear picture of the true impact of where it is that they're spending their dollars. So what you expect to see is that carbon market buyers will increasingly seek premium high quality credits, and they will even be prepared to pay a premium price for what they consider the high quality credits. And so this issue of high quality carbon credits is very linked to the idea of having integrity in the carbon markets, which is very fundamental to the very existence and also the value of the carbon credits. So how to think of it is in the sense, those look at it is from the perspective of what happens if carbon credits actually do not have any integrity. And the result of that will be is that first, they're going to, in essence, cause more harm than good. They'll create a very misleading picture about what exactly is being achieved in the fight, rather in the fight against climate change. It will create negative publicity. The credits themselves will lose value. There will be a diversion of funding that would otherwise have been used to create real-time benefits. And also, the carbon credits sort of idea in itself will no longer be a suitable option for offsetting emissions. So based on that, what then do carbon credits with integrity actually look like? And I've broken this down into 4 things. So the first one is the issue of respecting local communities. The second is overall positive impact. The third, carbon accounting. And the last one is on the claims made. So with respect to the first arm, that's the respect for local communities, it's very crucial that carbon projects not only respect, but also protect the local communities in which they're developed and involve them in the benefits that are generated by those carbon projects. So some of the issues to consider in this case is the protection of human rights. So as Luis mentioned, you need to consider are the local communities being displaced from their land in order to put up a carbon project? And if they're being displaced, are they being adequately compensated? Are they being resettled in a alternative piece of land for them. You also need to consider issues to do with the existing use of land that has been earmarked for that particular project. So, for example, if you're putting up a wind power plant in an area with a pastoralist community, are you going to cut off that community from accessing that land for purposes of grazing their animals, as an example? And then another issue is the aspect of having free and prior informed consent of local communities. In essence, like with any other infrastructure project, you need to sort of have like very elaborate engagements with the various stakeholders, explaining to them what the impact of that particular project will be, and ensuring that you actually have their consent for that particular project. Rather, you have what we call the social license to operate. I mean, if you have opposition from the local community, it's very hard to get the project off the ground to begin with. And also, by winning their support, you minimize any disputes that might affect the project, and also disputes that might result in emissions reversals or leakages. So, for example, by winning their consent and the support for a project, for reforestation projects as an example, it's less likely that they're going to later on come and start cutting down the trees so that they can do some form of agriculture or something of that sort. Then another issue is that this project will need to consider how they can mitigate negative impacts on related environmental and social factors that could impact local communities. So as I've said, for example, if with the example of if you're putting up a power project in an area with a pastoral community, are you going to forbid them from accessing that land in order to graze their animals, just as an example? Or if you're putting up a wind plant as well, just as another example, how do you protect the bird species that are located in that area? Because as you know, quite often there can be collisions between bird populations and the wind turbines. Then lastly, we have the issue of fair benefit sharing. So how do you share any of the revenues that are generated from a particular carbon project with the local community? And fortunately, we're seeing some of these being integrated into the laws that are being developed. So for example, under the Kenyan carbon market regulations, the project proponents are required to make certain annual social contributions, especially where land has been developed on community land. And then you also need to consider other incidental benefits that the local communities can derive from a particular project. So for example, they should be able to continue using that land to the extent viable. If you're planting trees, giving them something as simple as a right for them to be able to obtain shade from those trees. If the trees being planted are fruit trees, do they have a right to harvest from those trees for purposes of their own sustenance, and so on and so forth. And it's important to ensure that any benefits that are promised to the local communities are actually delivered. And lastly, consider ways of empowering the local communities. This will be done through, the usual CSR initiatives. So building schools, building hospitals, and so on and so forth. And then in relation to the second aspect, so that's the having an overall positive impact. The idea is that it's not sufficient for carbon projects to simply reduce or remove these greenhouse gases from the environment. They need to have other additional benefits. And the idea is that these projects are not to be developed at all costs. And there's also the do no harm principle. So, for example, as I said, you need to consider what other negative impacts can arise from these projects and how do you mitigate them. And also what other benefits can be derived from the project. So for example, empowerment of women. And there have actually been projects whereby there are certain issues to do with human rights that came up. So for example, the land being obtained illegally, issues to do with sexual harassment within the vicinities of these carbon projects, and so on and so forth. So it's very crucial that all these issues are addressed as you're looking at the overall impact of our project. I think a simple way to look at it will be to think of it as incorporating ESG into the development and implementation of these carbon projects. Then the third one, which ties to one of the issues I've seen that is being raised in the Q&A in the chat section, is that these carbon credits are supposed to be used alongside independent progress towards near-term emissions reduction targets. So what that means is that in themselves, they do not simply confer a right on a corporate entity to pollute. What should happen is that a corporate entity should say, we are working towards net zero. And as part of that process, what we're going to do is we're going, for instance, to start acquiring we're going to rely on renewable energy. So, we're going to put up solar power plants, we're going to enter into a corporate PPA and buy renewable energy from a power producer. And then we're also going to, for instance, put up a circular economy. So our waste will be used as raw material in a different process, and so on and so forth. And then to the extent that we are unable to actually reduce our carbon footprint, that is why we will bring in now the issue of carbon credits and use it to offset our own emissions in the short term, even as we continue to work towards potentially eradicating these carbon emissions. And then another critical issue to consider is that of additionality. And the idea is that the carbon projects that should be prioritized are only projects whose impacts, including the emissions reductions, will not otherwise have occurred without this finance that's going to come from the carbon credits. Then lastly, we have the issue of permanence. So ideally, the reduction or removal of carbon or other greenhouse gases from the atmosphere should be permanent, so as to minimize the risk of the same being reversed. And on the issue of carbon accounting, it's important that there's the scientific basis for calculating the tons of CO2 that have been reduced or removed from the atmosphere needs to be very accurate. And there's also need for third-party verification, which Luis mentioned. And the idea is that it should ensure that any credits that are issued actually represent carbon that has genuinely been reduced, removed, sequestered from the environment. And then there's a need for appropriate regular review of scientific basis for calculation of credits. And that, of course, is because as time goes by, our scientific understanding and the basis we use to calculate these emissions is continuously improving. And so how this carbon is being accounted for in a particular project also needs to continuously improve. And then to the extent that there's any sequestered carbon that is unexpectedly released, there needs to be an adjustment to the carbon accounting. So, for example, if there was a reforestation project and carbon credits have been generated from it, but then later on, for whatever reason, either those trees are cut down or that forest burns up because of a wildfire or something of that sort, how will that be addressed through adjustments? And then lastly is in relation to the claims made, and this is the last ambit for how to look at what to consider to be high quality carbon credits, is that there first needs to be sufficient information and transparency to allow the users or purchasers of these carbon credits to be able to assess the claims underlying that particular issuance. And then there needs to be a robust system for creation and transfer of credits so as to avoid the issue of double counting. And then these credits that are generated should be used to make factual claims that are not misleading. And it's important to avoid greenwashing, which essentially is a practice where the claims that are being made do not represent the actual truth on the ground. And in various jurisdictions, for example, in the UK, they're developing various regulations that are aimed at curtailing greenwashing. For example, in the UK, they have the I believe it's called the Green Claims Code. And in other jurisdictions, such as Kenya, while there's currently no express regulation on greenwashing, it's been provided for in some of our other laws. So, for example, under the guidelines that are issued by the Competition Authority, there are certain provisions that touch on the aspect of making environmental claims, and essentially organizations are prohibited from making environmental claims that are either false, inaccurate, or simply misleading. Just on the last two trends that we're going to look at, the first is that we're seeing the rise of other carbon pricing mechanisms. And the first one is, rather the most common one that is gaining quite a lot of traction, is carbon border adjustment mechanisms. And these are mechanisms that's implemented. I've seen your text, Eddie. I'm wrapping up. So the carbon border adjustment mechanisms are a mechanism implemented to account for the carbon cost of producing imported goods with the aim of reducing global GHG emissions. The rationale behind it is that in the EU, for instance, given that they are a very regulated market, a very heavily regulated market, so to speak, in terms of emissions and the likes, if goods that are imported into the EU are not taxed in a similar way that their own local goods are taxed, that importation can lead to carbon leakage with respect to their own GHG emission reduction goals. And in this case, carbon leakage essentially means the risk that firms in the EU will, from a commercial perspective, have to move their production abroad, or risk being outcompeted by more carbon-intensive imports due to having uneven climate policies in different countries. And then the last, if you're going to look at, is on the integration of technology in the carbon markets. So generally, of course, as technology continues to permeate every aspect of our lives, it's also expected that eventually it will be adopted in the operation of these carbon markets. And just to give some of the examples is that, for example, blockchain technology, through how it operates in terms of having a decentralized ledger, verification system, smart contracts, etc., can help to improve transparency and efficiency. So what the blockchain will be doing essentially is that it will be tracking carbon credits, tracking all the transactions relating to the carbon credits, tracking issues to do with tracking the data on emissions, and it can also help, and I mean, through this sort of very elaborate way of tracking, it can help to address the issue of double counting of carbon credits. So in the interest of time, I'll end it there, but I'll share the slides I believe will be shared with all the participants so that you can look at the remainder, further, you can have it for your own reference. I think that is the end of the presentation. I'll back to you, Edie.
What a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much, Freddie. That was so much of the information. Gabriel, I know I'm out of time, and I think we have few questions from Q&A and also 2 hands. What do you advise, Gabriel? Can we address them, or we can? I know the topic is so broad. I think the speakers, all of them have tried their best to cover what they're prepared, but it is so broad topic, and I think we need more time of these kind of webinars and all that. Gabriel, if you can hear me, what do you advise? Can we go about this Q&A and a few hands before we call it a day? Okay, let me just use my moderator's power. Let me, Luis, there is a question here on Q&A. I'm not sure if you have seen it, specifically on part of Kenya, where is it? There's a question. I've seen the question from speaker asked for Kenya. But you can address maybe the first one. The question says, why is there a feeling like there is more of business strategy with politics more than a scientific strategy to fight climate change? What is your view on this, Luis?
Thank you for that, moderator. Well, indeed, these are the discussions that have been ongoing at the various COPs, because there's a feeling that discussions are sort of skewed against emerging economies and favoring the more industrialized economies. But progress has been made, moving from the Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, and implementation of Article 6, as we've heard. So what I would say also, it's upon us as well as legal practitioners, and not just legal practitioners, also environmental scientists. I do not think that we send adequate negotiators if they are not adequately prepared, have sufficient knowledge, because these teams come well prepared. And I think we need to come up with common positions regionally and continentally, and really make a significant push to ensure that our interests are also catered for. I think it would be difficult to say that politics is not involved. It is involved, but I think we need to come together as a region, as a continent, to speak with one voice for our own interests. That's one way we can begin to push back to ensure that we are not unduly disadvantaged in these discussions. That's what I will say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise. And I think that was very, very informative. I think most of the questions have been answered by Louise. Thank you, Louise. I've been addressing them. I think all of them. I'm not sure if we have more pending. Some of them are just asking for slides. Allow me now to just 1 minute for each. I think I have only 2 hands here, and only 1 from Stephen and Isaac. I think Stephen, if you're still on, still want to speak. Gabriel, are you there? Yes, thank you. Stephen, I think, we, as you can see, we're out of time. So maybe 1 minute, maybe. Karibu. Stephen? Okay, let's go for Isaac. Isaac, do you have anything? Okay, I think most of the questions have been raised prior. So I think Gabriel, are you there? Maybe when you were waiting for Gabriel, I think I can just say something to I mean, as my key takeaway, young lawyers. We have a lot of opportunities to come up with ideas, because now, for instance, in Tanzania, we have these, the project have been divided in REDD+ project and non-REDD+ project. So as a young lawyer, you can come up with an idea of maybe to implement something on REDD+ projects, and approach some one of the village or one of the community, and give up your idea, like we can utilize this forestry and gain out of it, rather than just have it remain as it is. So I think there is much of the opportunities for us to be to be proactive and grab them. And in terms of how after initiated idea, I think in the process of registration, come up with an agreement between the managing authority and project proponent. Regulating how are you going to protect the interest of the community. Now I think that's a lawyer's part. Play along, and I'm assuming that as a young lawyer, we are so energetic to go through these villages and come up with and proposing these ideas, and be proactive, go to the village council, proposed meetings and all that. I think that's more of activeness we have, and come up with and foresee the whole process of a lawyer. So just to add up from all the opportunities which have been mentioned by Louise and Freddie and Tajel, that's among the things which we can do as young lawyers as well. I think we can. I'm not sure if there is anything, maybe 1 sentence, a few seconds from Freddie as a key takeaway, and Louise, just 1 sentence before we welcome Gabriel, just to call it, a day. Freddie, karibu.
Thanks, Eddie. In terms of my key takeaway would be that while of course is that aspect of the political arguments as to whether carbon credits are actually good for the environment, I think the way for us to look at it, especially as Africans, is that given that it's only said that we have contributed the least to climate change, but we're going to bear the brunt of it. I think the carbon credits present a very viable opportunity for us to be able to raise some of the funds that we actually need to be able to mitigate the impacts of climate change. And then secondly, I think I would say is that moving forward, our focus should be on having the high quality carbon credits. So focusing on issues to do with how they impact local communities, the additionality from these carbon credits, the permanence of the carbon credits, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Fred and Gabriel, to call it a day.
All right. Mine is to say it's an exciting space. Take advantage of these opportunities, keep learning, engaging. The sky's the limit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise. Gabriel? Okay, there is someone who he or she asked the question here. Louise, maybe you can just finalize with it. And with an insist, please answer my question. All right. Aren't carbon markets a way of encouraging pollution by big industries or emitters with deep pockets? And is in the long run, want states where carbon credits have been sold run out, not effectively exploit their own industrial potential? What do you think of this, Louise?
This is definitely a tricky one. I'm not quite sure how to go either way. But, this is where we have conversations on climate justice and what is the position of emerging economies, the global south, to ensure that their interests are represented. And these economies do develop, they can harness and use their resources, their oil reserves. So this is a tricky one. I can't say this way or the other, but what I will say is there are conversations on climate justice. If you would like resources, groups that you can join, you can reach out and we can see how we can engage further to ensure that the development of the continent is not unduly suppressed. Let me leave it at that. Thank you.
Gabriel, he's here now. Gabriel, I'm so sorry for utilizing more than expected, but now this proves a point that this is the topic that needs more webinars and more engaging with these type of speakers who are well. You can see Louise and Fred and Tajel and the rest, like they wanted to talk more and more, but time was limited. So I think that's a key takeaway for East African Society. We need more of these webinars and more of engaging. Now, after a wonderful discussion, let me take this opportunity to thank you, Freddie, to thank you, Louise, and to thank Tajel, who is have another meeting right now, and Mr. The one who spoke on fundamental key takeaways. Thank you so much for the insightful discussion. Thank you all for participating. Let me leave the floor now to Gabriel. Thank you so much, Gabriel, for this wonderful opportunity to attend this webinar.
Thank you so much, Edie. Thank you so much. And a big round of appreciation goes to our panelists, Fred, Louis, Tajel, and everybody who was on the panel. We really do appreciate you taking off time to prepare and be part of this very insightful session. The East Africa Law Society Secretariat will be sharing out certificates of appreciation to both the panelists and a certificate of participation to you, our esteemed attendees who have taken off your entire afternoon to be here with us. And as we conclude, This Thursday, we'll be having another session, and this time round, we'll be looking at the world of business and human rights, which is another emerging area in legal practice that you ought to take keen interest in. And we'll be discussing access to remedy, and would want to understand what the role of alternative dispute resolution is in resolving business and human rights disputes. So be sure to join that session on Thursday from 2 to 4 p.m. But from us to you, have yourself a very lovely afternoon, and we look forward to hosting you at our two forthcoming events, one in Kigali, construction law and FIDIC contracts conditions. And then we also do have a space law masterclass, which is happening in October. And you can get more information by visiting our website and also writing to us at ELO Society, info@elosociety.org, and you'll be attended to. Otherwise, have yourselves a very lovely day, and we'll see each other again on Thursday. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Gabriel.